So I remember I told you in the Facebook chat, I sent you a few links and stuff.
Uh-huh.
So I cited from one of those links here in the chat here in this Riverside chat. So if you look there, the chat, Rabbi Moshe Wiener said, Shulchan Aruch Yardat 2:1, the slaughter by an Akum that does not worship idols. Therefore, wherever Akum is mentioned in Talmud and Halakhic literature, it means every Gentile non-Jew, unless explicitly said otherwise. In other words, Akum can mean one who does not worship idols. Here's an example where Akum does not mean someone who worships idols. So now, this is my question. When Akum is used interchangeably, it doesn't necessarily clarify things. It doesn't make it more difficult if it's used interchangeably. It's possible, this is just a supposition, it's possible that it is based on the old-fashioned typesetting. It was difficult. Every word was difficult, so they had to look for abbreviations wherever they could find it. And I found in a old edition, like from the 19th century of the Shulchan Aruch, they do, when they're using older-fashioned typesetting, they do use the word Akum. But in my edition of Mishnah Berurah on the same Shulchan Aruch, so it's using the language of Eno Yehudi, non-Jew. So therefore, this is clearly like Yeridea 2:1, where Akum, even according to those editions where there's Akum I'm talking about Orach Chaim 607. Sorry, Orach Chaim 307. So even in Orach Chaim 307, where it's translated, where it uses the word Akum, that Akum definitely does not refer to idolaters.
That's the source. That's the source we needed to verify that. But then, like you said, it doesn't solve anything, especially with the Ramban bomb, because now you don't know which Akum he's talking about. All you know is there is an Akum.
Yeah, yeah. Go ahead. You first.
There is an if an Akum is not a this or that, how do we know which Akum the Rambam is talking about that can't study Torah?
Okay, so now you sent me a picture of Rabbi Goldschmidt saying, well, in halacha only Israel and Akum exist today. However, I just showed you in the text chat and my description of my Mishnah Berurah, Akum is flexible. It doesn't only mean idolater. Russell showed me a picture a few hours ago from Rabbi Goldschmidt that he said there's only Israel and Akum in terms of halacha, not in terms of intention and theology. So, but however, that statement doesn't resolve it, because Akum itself, we just proved, doesn't only mean idolater. Akum can mean just a Eno Yehudi, a friendly Shabbos goy. It does not mean somebody, if you turn your back, he's going to take your wines and sacrifice idols.
But that gets into this touchy area of a Shabbos goy. And it seems to me, or I know we've gone through these debates long ago about the Shabbos goy and how that is putting a title of idolater on you, because the Jew can't ask a righteous Jew to break the Sabbath.
I wouldn't call it idolatry.
I mean, a righteous non-Jew to do something to violate the Sabbath.
Well, I think a lot of I think a lot of Shabbos goys are nice people, but we're talking about if you're talking about somebody on the like at or near the level of a Ger Toshav, as being among the righteous of the nations, if that's your definition. So that I think there could be a Shabbos Goy who is on different levels on that spectrum. So really what we need for this is to have somebody like on Rabbi Yehuda's level who could just in one sentence, give the ruling on this. There's many ways to interpret different aspects of this. So therefore, I think it's kind of fraught with danger when you have non-great scholars,
it is fraught with danger.
Making declarations, absolute declarations.
Yeah.
That's
Russellism.
That's my saying, is fraught with danger.
Yes.
And you're right. And so now that goes into a whole nother category of questions on this same topic, meaning that can Judaism sustain the righteous non-Jew without a Sanhedrin?
Well, the whole idea of a Sanhedrin is there is no debate. You simply ask a question and you get your answer.
There you go.
So now, if you have even in a generation of exile, when you have an accessible great scholar like Rabbi Moses Feinstein, where for over a decade he was, anyone could go to his house and get the most complex answer in just a sentence or two, or he could write you a paragraph or two. So then that's it's almost like having a Sanhedrin. But now we're in a situation where you want to call someone who's could be eligible for a Sanhedrin, but it's hard to reach anyone at that level, on the first try.
Well, even after Kamenetsky's death, is there anyone left?
Yes, there is. And if for Mashiach to be able to come in any generation, there has to be able to be a Sanhedrin in any generation. So therefore, there has to be 71 great scholars in the world. It's just that they're not as accessible. A lot of the people we know may just be scholars who are teaching Gemara, not deciding halacha. So that is, there's a big proliferation there, not in halachic deciders.
Well, why can't there be a consensus that comes up to naming 72 scholars and establishing a Sanhedrin?
71. Well,
71.
Actually, right. If the Sanhedrin requires...
We have to have a debate over whether 71 or 72?
It's actually 223.
Okay.
Because, okay, so was it 213? So, yeah, 213. So, for every sage on the Sanhedrin, there has to be a backup. And for every backup, there has to be a backup. So really, you're talking about 3 times 71.
3 times 71 is...
Which on the math I'm using is 213. If you have a math where it's a little bit different, so...
Well, I'll tell you what, if all of these questions and everything were math, we wouldn't have any problems because math is straight. So
right. So this whole topic is based on a discussion revolving around the word Akum, which we have established according to what I've seen, and also according to Rabbi Moshe Wiener, is at some level a fluctuating term.
Okay, so it's a fluctuating term. Now, how do you discern the Rambam that Akum can't study Torah? Does it mean both, or how can it, if it's fluctuating, how can it mean both?
Well, he means it in the way he means it. The question is, how does he mean it? So we should be asking.
You're trying to get way too rabbinical right there.
So we should be asking those levels of rabbis. So, for example, whether or not they're in the top 71 or not, So what we have to look for is somebody who is probably in the top 200 scholars of the generation.
Sure.
When you think about that, so you think about the big rabbis of the generation, right? Everybody knows, but there's lower, at least aged lower, but they are also great scholars. They're just not known because people keep looking for the somebody over 70 years old.
Right. And see, I know that Rabbi Katz went to Rabbi Kamenetsky and asked him about Ger Toshav, and it really wasn't a conclusive answer to what he got, and he wouldn't write it down.
In the old days, like let's say a few decades ago, anytime you had a Rosh Yeshiva of a yeshiva that makes rabbis, so generally speaking, you would have a great posek who is potential to be on the Sanhedrin. But nowadays there are so many yeshivas; they're really designed to make Gemara scholars more than it is to make the next Sanhedrin member. So therefore, you may have an institution entirely run by people who are not on the level of a Sanhedrin, even though they're teaching Gemara a very high level.
Right. Well, but this goes back into a Israel problem. They should be training people to in the expectation of creating a Sanhedrin.
Yeah, but again, it's about these people do exist. It's just we don't necessarily know them. If you go to your average yeshiva, you're not necessarily certain to find one of these great poskim. If you go to a very large yeshiva nowadays, you're pretty certain to find one of these great poskim. For example, Rav Savitsky of Torah V'das, whether or not he's written as many books as other scholars, to be the head Rav of Torah V'das with over 100 years, history of making the greatest scholars of the generation in many ways. So he's certain to be at that category, whether or not you've heard about him or know him. Baruch Hashem, I'm blessed to meet him. But so that's the situation. There are many great rabbis. They're just not necessarily the type you would know. The key thing about a great rabbi is that he could make a decision of life or death and not make a mistake. So it doesn't really matter if he wrote 100 books or not. And it doesn't matter if he's never been on the internet. In fact, maybe you don't want someone who frequents the internet to be.
Yeah. That's probably... But okay, so let's look at it from another direction with the relationship between Antoninus and Rabbi Yehuda. Where is how does this relationship exist? Obviously we know now it can exist because Akum is a fluid term.
Mm-hmm.
And so we can say, okay, he was not an Akum that was an idolater that allowed him to engage with Rabbi Yehuda at that level that he did. So it begs, I think the question that we're formulating here goes back to the Rambam and asking, how do we know if Rambam is a this or a that? But what they're saying is it means both. And it does mean both. They're not wrong. It's just it can't mean both at the same time.
Exactly. A seesaw goes two ways. Right. A seesaw goes two ways, but not at the same time.
Right. So which one can't study Torah?
Whoever's not allowed to.
But I know, yeah. So I mean, we're gonna formulate this question out of there, which is great that we got to this point to where we can make the question, because it doesn't matter what the answer is if we don't have the right question, it's not going to mean anything.
Right. I mean, I am an outreach rabbi. I spend significant enough time during the week on Facebook, so I'm not the first person I look to for these kind of answers. So you already have spoken to a great posek or of Moshe Soloveitchik. So if you can reach him again, I would recommend speaking to someone like that. Ask him.
I have one avenue possibly to where I can get a hold of him, but and I will that I can get his. I've only got one avenue left, should I say, that I could reach out to and possibly get some contact information from. The only way, the story that goes behind this is these two friends of mine were literally standing outside the door of the yeshiva in Chicago trying to figure out if they were at the right place and even how to get in, when a gentleman walked in going into the yeshiva, said, "Hey, come on in," and pushed a button and did the little code on the door, and they walked in with him. Mm-hmm. And they said, "Well, we're looking for Moshe Soloveitchik." And they said, "Oh, well, wait just a minute." And they wound up going back and seeing him just like that. Mm-hmm. And that's how they built their relationship with him, out of something like that. And so, and the way the rest of the story goes, when they were asking him these type of questions, he told them about this chapter 3 in his father's book. And that he literally told him, he said, "It's time for this information to come out. I'm going to give you permission to translate it." And what a lot of people don't know is that he went over the translation word for word and made all the changes to it that needed to be changed, except for the last, very small segment of it. And I listened a lot of times on the phone when this was happening, so I know it happened. Mm-hmm. And I was listening to, while they were on the computer, I was listening on the phone.
Mm-hmm. What translation was this?
This was Ode Israel Yosef Chai, chapter 3. This is the question: is when a Jew walks 4 cubits with the idolaters dead.
Was it Yisrael Yosef Ben Chai?
Yosef, yeah. Ben Chai. That's what it was. That's the book. Do you have that book?
No, I just remember when it first came out.
Yeah, that's the book, chapter 3 in that book. Now, that is a huge book and a chapter that can do a lot of things. I think the importance of this chapter, one of the important things we could pull out of this chapter is maybe fixing the relationship between the Jew, the righteous non-Jew that comes out of the church, and his relationship with those that are still in the church. What Brad was saying earlier today about this Luzzatto piece, as far as could do a lot in understanding where everybody's at and what they're doing, and to where there could be some type of and I say compassion towards them, but some kind of respect. And I don't think the Jews were showing compassion to the idolatrous dead. They were just showing them some type of respect. And because without that respect, we can't co-inhabit.
But I mean, if somebody is not trying to proactively worship idolatry or shito, if they're trying to be a good Ben Noach, so at that point, there's really no room to be tough, in my opinion. You have to, embrace the good being attempted.
To be what?
You shouldn't be tough with somebody who's trying to do good.
Right. You're trying to do right, and of course
somebody
that's what.
is right. If somebody has already left idolatry, if they've already separated from shituf is using an intermediary, such as praying to a saint, etc. So if somebody already left even that level, so they're really, really trying to serve the God of Israel the way a Gentile is supposed to.
So
with that point,
yeah. And see, that's the thing we run. That's the thing we've run across. Here we are trying to learn Torah, trying to figure out who we are, what we are, listening to 100 different opinions, and trying to meet all this stuff out. And we're getting beat up by the same people that would go and walk 4 cubits with an idolater. But yet the B'nai Noach that's trying to learn Torah and trying to do something is getting beat back with a stick. And so I think there's a lot out of that chapter of Aaron Soloveitchik's that a lot of the lessons, that can be learned from it.
Right. So maybe when you do reach Rabbi Soloveitchik, ask him where we could find this publication.
Yes, we got to figure out where that book is, where to get a copy of that book.